doing well. How are you guys doing tonight? I appreciate that enthusiasm. Would you like to stand with me as we get started so we can worship together? We can pray and sing. Yes, we're going to take up an offering first. Greg, would you like to pray for us? God of compassion, mercy and grace, I know where I've come from and how I've been saved. The arms of the Father, faithful and true, comfort and heal me. You make all things new. God of compassion. God of compassion, mercy and grace, you know where I've come from and how I've been saved. The arms of the Father, faithful and true, comfort and heal me. You make all things new. With your great love, with your great love for me, your great love for me. Where could I go that you could not reach? With your great love for me. God of compassion, mercy and grace, you know where I've come from and how I've been saved. The arms of the Father, they're faithful and true, comfort and heal me. You make all things new. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Great love, with your great love for me, your great love for me. Where could I go that you could not reach? With your great love for me. Let's sing that chorus again. With your great love for me, your great love where could I go that you could not reach with your great love for me? For me. And we cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy, holy. And we cry, holy, holy, holy is the Lamb. We cry, holy, holy, holy. And we cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy, holy is the Lamb.
It is? Okay. I got something for you. Hold on a minute. Let's see if this works. Can y'all hear that? All right, now imagine Laban's picture will pop up on there with the subtitles, and then next you see Rachel and Leah, maybe Jacob is in front of them, and there's some past episodes showing where he's laying his head on a rock, angels going up and down. Now you see all the sons in the beast, as they smile for them, Just 1 minute. I think Sam taught it as the well water turns. So we were continuing the soap opera today. I'm sorry, I like that. I've watched that on YouTube a lot. It just brings back memories. I don't know why. JR was such a jerk. Anyway, yeah, there we go. I'm serious. I could just see. I wish I was better on the computer. I'd have had a whole thing ready for y'all. I called Lisa and she told me she wasn't going to be here, so she's not good.
Well, that low tech thing worked though.
The,
Maybe she needs our imagination.
you never know. I might be like Brian. I saw him walk in with like Carrot Top with a bag full of props. One time. Anyway, I'm so sorry. Let's just review just a second as we went through the last couple of chapters. So we've been talking about how God can use our circumstances. We talked about how God uses our consequences, how God uses difficult people, and how God uses time. And he uses all these things. And again, that's not an exhaustive list, but he uses these things to mold and shape his people. Consequences, circumstances, difficult people, and time. And then the 5 things I wanted to remember from a couple of Wednesdays ago was we needed, when we're caught in those times, Danny, that we need to recognize these things, that God's hands in these daily events, and submit ourselves to them, whatever they are. and submit to God when we're not just reaping the consequences of somebody else's actions, but when it's no fault of our own. That if it's consequences, whether from our sin or through hard times or hard people, sometimes there's still some submission to God, and we'll continue to see that in Jacob's life. And not to run from difficult people, because God uses these difficult people in a mighty way. Yes, He can, absolutely. And then we talked about how we need to persevere for the long haul, that this is not a 100-yard dash, but it's a marathon of life. So we need to make sure we're pacing ourselves and working on our endurance and our perseverance. And then through it all, we need to thank God for His blessings in spite of our sin, in spite of our consequences, in spite of our circumstances, the hard times, how long we're waiting, whatever it is, there's always a way and a reason to thank God for His blessings. So last week we met Reuben, and I told y'all in my mind I kind of saw these names as an attack from the sisters and one another, kind of a little bit. So we know Reuben meant behold a son. It was like Leah was going, nah, I did it first kind of thing. And then we saw Simeon means to be heard. Levi, to be joined or to be joined to something. Judah means praise. We saw that Rachel got jealous because she couldn't have children. And so she says, here's Bilhah, take my maidservant and have a child with her. So then we have Dan, which is the fifth son of Jacob, and his name translates to God is my judge. So it was like Rachel was saying back to Leah, God has now vindicated me from my reproach of barrenness. And then Naphtali. I was making that difficult. You know what you did. So Naphtali means wrestling. So we saw this in chapter 30, verse 8, when Rachel said, with mighty wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have indeed prevailed. And she named him Naphtali. So we saw this fight, and then Leah kind of stopped bearing children, and so she took her handmaid, Zilpah, and she gave her to Jacob. So Jacob was busy, right? And then he gave birth to Gad, which means warrior. So then you have this fight. So it was like Leah was saying, wrestle with me. This means war, that kind of thing. And then Leah, then there was Asher, Jacob's eighth son, which means happy and blessed. And then the whole issue with the mandrakes. So Leah bought a night with her husband by selling her son's mandrakes to Rachel. That was the whole thing. And so she conceived again, and Ishkar was born, which means to recompense. So she felt like she was being compensated or rewarded because she had given her maid to Jacob. And then Zebulun was, I did so much better with it that time. It means, it's a name that means to dwell. So his name was symbolic of Leah's hope that this new sixth son would find Jacob and her dwelling together instead of her sister. And then we've seen the first daughter born, Dinah, which means justice. And then Rachel gives birth to Joseph, which means he increases. He was the 12th child and the 11th son at the time. And so now we get to the second part of chapter 30. I want to play the theme music again. So, reading through the rest of Jacob's life on a serious note, Jacob was one of probably my least favorite people in Scripture. I could never get past the birthright thing. But I've learned so much in going through this. Sorry. ADD. It's going to have a stroke. I'm going to take this off, Levi, okay? I will. It don't take a whole lot. Hides my double chin. No, what's everybody's issue with my... Anyway, so we get to verses 25 through 43. And again, with Jacob used to be one of my least favorite people in Scripture. Just reading ahead, I just found myself having so much more respect for him. You know, even going through everything that Abraham went through, and we saw his humanity, and we saw everything that Isaac went through, and we saw his humanity. But I don't know. There was just something that's hit me about Jacob in his life that I have a newfound respect for him, especially after this lesson. When we get into the future ones, it gets gooder. So for verses 25 through 27, it said, soon after Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, please, release me so I can go home to my own country. Let me take my wives and my children, for I have earned them by serving you, and let me be on my way. You certainly know how hard I have worked for you. Please listen to me. Laban replied and said, I have become wealthy, for the Lord has blessed me because of you. So these verses, not all of them, most of what we're going to do tonight in chapter 30 and part of 31 come out of the New Living Translation, just because it reads better and there's so much. But in verse 27, when Laban says, please listen to me, I have become wealthy, for the Lord has blessed me because of you, it's actually translated, I have divined, or I have learned by divination. And that's only important because you get a little bit of a peek of more of who Laban was, his idolatry, and we'll see that more when we get into the other chapters. But I only brought that out so we could, not only was he manipulating and deceiving and deceptive, but he also didn't serve our God. Amen. 28 through 32. He said, tell me how much I owe you. Whatever it is, I'll pay it. And Jacob replied, you know how hard I've worked for you and how your flocks and herds have grown under my care. You had little indeed before I came, but your wealth has increased enormously. The Lord has blessed you through everything I've done. But now, what about me? When can I start providing for my own family? What wages do you want? Laban asked again, and Jacob replied, don't give me anything. Just do this one thing, and I'll continue to tend and watch over your flocks. Let me inspect your flocks today and remove all the sheep and goats that are speckled or spotted, along with all the black sheep. Give these to me as my wages. So that doesn't sound unreasonable. And I was trying to make something out of the speckled or spotted goats and those things. It wasn't that they were less valuable. They were just not as common. And so essentially Jacob was saying, I will take this small portion of these speckled, spotted up goats and sheep, and you can keep everything else. He said, this will be my wages. And you got to understand, Laban knew. And I also liked what I started seeing in Jacob. Jacob didn't say that you have been blessed because of me. Jacob said, the Lord has blessed you through everything I've done. So he gave credit to God for the blessing that was going on in Laban's life. So that kind of shows you a growth in Jacob there already. But Laban, seriously, he just said, whatever it is, whatever you want, I know that I'm being blessed because you are here. And you also kind of see Jacob's heart too. He said, I want to start providing for my own family. Because you got to think, up to this point, Jacob was still working off 14 years of labor for Laban. He had worked 7 years for Rachel, and he got Leah. So they said he could work another 7 years, even though he went ahead and married Rachel. He was still paying that dowry that he had promised his uncle. But when we get down to 31, it wasn't just Jacob woke up one morning and said, let me do this. When we get down to 31, we can kind of see that the Lord had pushed him in this direction and told him what to do. Any questions so far? Yeah. So this starts his new thing. He said, let me take all these speckled and spotted goats and sheep, and you keep the rest. I'll take this small amount. So that's what, yes, that's exactly what. Yes. Yeah. And we'll learn when we get down to the bottom, this is a 6-year time period. So he's had 14 years working off his 2 wives. and then he'll spend the next 6 years doing this part here. Yes. Yep. But as far as but it was still valuable, and it was still a very big part of Laban's income, but it was much, much, much less than so Jacob was essentially saying, I'll just take, I'm not even asking for much, Yes, sir. Good point. So Jacob wanted to start providing for his own family, because could you imagine working 14 years and not have anything you can call your own as far as, things? You just work 14 years to pay off a debt. I mean, you have your wife and you have your children, but you essentially you don't have anything else to call your own. That's unfathomable to me.
Think about it in the context later in the next chapter.
Don't. We'll think about it when we get there, and if I don't say it, then say it. I know. 33 through 36. I missed you, Sam. So Jacob goes on. It says, check my integrity if you don't believe me, he said in verse 33. In the future, when you check on the animals that you have given me as my wages, you will see that I have been honest. If you find my flock any goats without speckles or spots, or any sheep that are not black, you will know that I have stolen from you. All right, Laban replied, it will be as you say. But that very day, Laban went out and removed the male goats that were speckled and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted or had white patches, and all the black sheep, and he placed them in the care of his own sons, who took them a 3 days' journey from where Jacob was. Meanwhile, Jacob stayed and cared for the rest of Laban's flock. So Laban agreed to this thing, this agreement with Jacob. But when Jacob wasn't looking, he took everything and sent his sons away 3 miles away while Jacob was still looking after his flock. So Laban was a very deceptive, manipulating man, but he's essentially digging his own grave, and we'll see that as we go forward. I think that's why one of the prime examples of sin is fun for a season. We'll kind of see it all crumble down. Anything for these few verses here, Sam?
Well,
I do love it. Okay. 37 through 43. Now, let me read it first, and then we'll kind of go over it. So then Jacob took some fresh branches from the poplar, from the almond, and from plane trees, and peeled off strips of bark, making white streaks on them. So imagine that in your mind's eye. And then he placed these peeled branches in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, for that was where they mated. And when they mated in front of the white streaked branches, they gave birth to young that were streaked, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob separated those lambs from Laban's flock, and at mating time he turned the flock to the face of Laban's animals. He turned the flock to Laban's animals that were streaked and black. This is how he built his own flock instead of increasing Laban's. Whenever the stronger females were ready to mate, Jacob would place some peeled branches in the watering troughs in front of them. When they would mate in front of the branches, then they would mate in front of the branches. But he didn't do this with the weaker ones. So, let's see. So he did not do this with the weaker ones. So the weaker lambs belonged to Laban, and the stronger ones were Jacob's. As a result, Jacob became very wealthy with large flocks of sheep and goats, female and male servants, and many camels and donkeys. Imagine reading that in the King James Version. Oh. Well, it's not Jacob. See, that's where I disagree. Jacob wasn't being sneaky. Jacob was doing his job. He was doing what he was supposed to be doing. I don't feel like he was doing any wrong here. But I did get trapped with why in the world is he going to these trees, peeling the bark off and setting them in front of the goats? And I struggled with it with a long time. And if you want to get some weird answers, just go see what people have to say about it. Well, the wisdom had to come from somewhere, but this wasn't magic. This wasn't a secret code that God was using. If they'll eat in front of this piece of wood, then you'll get a speckled one. It wasn't. That's not what God was doing. These types of trees were actually very nutritious for the animals, and He didn't just place them anywhere. He put them in the watering trough. So He lined these specific things in front of the watering trough, and when the females would come to drink, and their focus was on drinking and eating, then the males would take an opportunity to come from behind and do their thing. Does that make sense? Okay. I was trying so hard to be mature with that. So that's essentially what was done. These particular trees had, from what I remember reading, they had properties where the goats and the sheep liked to eat them. They liked the bark. It was nutritious for them as far as fiber, and it also, what was the other thing? I had some medicinal things that with animals at the time. So it wasn't some magical potion that Jacob was told to lay out. He was being smart. He was like, I'll have these goats facing this direction. They won't be paying attention to the guys coming from behind, and we're going to have babies. Does that make sense? Did I explain that right, Danny? Because I figured you would know. No. That didn't make him spotted. That's where he was a little sneaky. He placed specific goats. He let them water at certain times. So when the other goats would come up, that they would breed these spotted and speckled goats. Yeah, he was handling his business. He was breeding, so to speak. Yes, that's the right word. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. I don't know why. How long I spent just on that little bit right there, because I couldn't get it in my head, and then until it got in there, and then it made sense.
When you first read it, you think he's doing something shady, but in reality, he's just doing.
Yeah, selective breeding. That's a good way. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yep. But again, if it is interesting, if you look up the poplar tree, the almond tree, and these plane trees, anyway, it's something. So we see that now Jacob's starting to see a little bit of the blessing that he was promised, right? Again, 14 years working for his wives. And now he starts to make a living for himself. So much so that it says in 43 that he was so wealthy that he had large flocks of sheep and goats, female male servants, and many camels and donkeys. So he had increased quite a bit. So in here we kind of end chapter 30, and Jacob's trying to get home, earn his own way. Uncle Laban is still conniving and deceitful and greedy. And so then we get into the first part of 31. So I went a particular way with these few verses. So if there's anything to add, Sam, please do, because I know that this is not all at all. All right, here we go. So first two verses, chapter 31. But Jacob soon learned that Laban's sons were grumbling about him. Jacob was robbed. It says, Jacob has robbed our father of everything. He has gained all his wealth at our father's expense. And Jacob began to notice a change in Laban's attitude toward him. So here we kind of see this jealousy and this envy start to set in. So I wanted to talk about jealousy and envy, and just so we could look at the difference between the two, because sometimes people use them interchangeably, and sometimes that works, sometimes not so much. But with jealousy, it's defined as the fear or concern that someone else would take something that you possess or own, or that you believe you possess or own. And so when I read that definition, the first thing I thought of was God. How many times in Scripture does God say He's jealous of us? And think about that definition. The fear or concern that someone else would take something that you possess or own. And Ed's been talking about how nothing can separate us from the love of God. And how true and wonderful is that? How much can separate Him from our love? What takes us away from Him? That's what we have to be careful about. So I've put in a couple scriptures. In Exodus 34:14, God calls Himself, His name, jealous. He said, "For you shall not worship any other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God." I mean, He just puts it right out there, right? And then in Psalm 78:58, He says, "For they provoked Him with their high places and aroused His jealousy with their graven images." And it was all because He didn't want what was His to be taken away. And there's so much more, and I didn't put this in there, but you got Exodus chapter 20, you got Deuteronomy, all of it. You've got Nahum 1, Joshua 24, Ezekiel, all through it, and so on. There's so many scriptures that talk about God's jealousy for His people. And then we got envy, which by definition is a resentment that you feel because of the advantages or possessions of others. So it looks like here there's a little bit of jealousy and a little bit of envy going on with Laban and his sons, but envy seems to be the culprit. Both can come from a feeling of coveting. So just a couple points about envy. Envy will distract you from the truth, and it will also distort the truth. It wasn't that Jacob had taken anything that belonged to Laban. It was that his wealth was growing bigger and faster than their father's. And it also looks like Jacob's cousins were only angry because it started in the eyes of Laban. So that's another point. Envy can be passed on. You know, they probably heard Daddy grumbling about everything that was going on in Jacob's life, and then it just kind of spilled over into them. In James chapter 3, 14 through 16, we've referred to this verse before. It says, "Who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior his deeds in gentleness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and lie against the truth." Remember, jealousy and envy will distract you from the truth, and it will distort the truth. And then it says, "This wisdom is not which comes from above, but is earthly and natural and demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder in every evil thing." And that verse, we can read that verse and then think about everything that Jacob's been going through and everything that Laban has lied and manipulated to get in that verse. He's living this earthly, natural, demonic thing that James warns us about. Amen? So not only does it distract you from the truth and distort the truth, it also saps us from all of our energy. Everything that we have is put into this jealousy and envy, this thing that controls us. In in Proverbs chapter 14, it says, a sound heart is life to the body, but envy is rottenness to the bones. So there's life in this sound heart, and there's death in this envy and this jealousy. And that word, sound heart, means tranquil or healing, free from disturbance. So when you've got a heart that's free from disturbance, it's life. Does that make sense? So it's the exact opposite of chaos. It's peace. And when I was thinking about that, I have a question here. How can we have a sound heart? When? How is it possible to have a tranquil mind and a tranquil heart and be satisfied and be content when we have worked 14 years for nothing? When we have slaved for a man who we know has lied and cheated us over and over and over again, and still submit to him and wait on God's direction. How can we have that kind of tranquility? When you find out, let me know, because I didn't have the answer. But just be careful with this envy thing, because it grows. And I didn't put it in here, but it distorts and blinds you from every good thing that God's trying to do. And that can go in material possessions. That can go with just someone's life. It can go with people in ministry. Like if you focus too much on what someone else is doing in ministry and you're not, it can rob you of everything. You're wondering why doors aren't opening when you're holding it shut. You understand? Be careful with envy. A sound heart is life to the body. There is a way to have peace that passes all understanding. There's a way to have a tranquil mind, even in the midst of a storm. How do I know it's possible? Well, it's not because I live it. It's because God promises it to me. He says I have a peace that passes all understanding. He tells me that my peace I give to you, not as the world does, but my peace I give to you. That tells me that there's a peace that I can grab a hold of that will give me a sound heart and a sound mind and amongst whatever's happening. And we need that as Christians more than ever. I'm sorry. Yeah, he's tranquil. I was going to say something. Angela did me wrong yesterday, but 3. And again, this list is not exhaustive at all. It's just what's in my head. Envy makes it impossible to love. And we could go through and read all of chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians, but I'd already had so much on the paper. So just in chapter 13, verse 4, it says, love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, and it is not puffed up. If Jacob was walking in anything else, do you think he could have stayed where he was at? Was it just his love for Rachel that kept him his focus? Or do you think that he's developed a love for Leah that he didn't have in the beginning? And that he knows God is in the midst of it all? It also said that love is patient and all those good things. If envy is the resentment you feel because of the advantages or possessions of others, how can we change that state of mind? I have no answer. I do. It's probably like a math equation. It's not just one. It's 1 + 2 + 3 kind of thing, yeah. There you go. You,
I think thankfulness is the big piece. If I can learn to be thankful instead of looking over there going, man, I wish I had that picture there, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Yes. It's learning how to be content with what he's given me instead of always wanting something else. If I get that other thing, then I'll be happy. Then I'll be, and that then never happens.
and we know all this, right? Already. This is something we know, but do we what I think about is, I've been trying to minister to Chloe a lot. She's getting married in December. If you see me at Walmart at the stop sign, just stop, throw me some money in the can. But we we have been trying, to minister to her and the boy, Taylor, the boy. He's a really good kid. He really is. Yeah. And I feel like that God is sitting down and saying everything that y'all said about what we can do not to be envy. And our eyes just glaze over. I mean, that's when I hear that, when I ask that question, like when I ask them questions to try to get them to think about stuff, I don't want to give them the answer. I want them to tell me what the answer is. And you can just see them glaze over. Because it can't be that simple, Ed, just to be thankful. If envy starts with the resentment that we feel because what someone else has, and the answer is, well, be thankful for what you have. It can't be that simple, but it is, isn't it? And we'll probably talk about Paul more when we get into the next couple of chapters, because there's a lot of mirrored stuff there. It's really good. That's good. Thank you. Sam? Go ahead. I'm going to be upset if it's in here, though. Yeah, I guess I'm just making this too personal because I'm seriously, Jacob waited 20 years to go home. Probably I don't think he wanted to stay where he was at for 20 years, not in the state that he was in. And I tell Chloe and Taylor, 4 years for the rest of your life, talking about school. 4 years. 4 years for the rest of your whole life. It doesn't even compare. If you'll invest in yourself, school-wise, rest of your life. But all you can see, we're so caught up in she would kill me. But if we can't see past now. We want everything right now. And we know this promise that was made to Jacob was made to Abraham centuries ago. Patience would be a good one to talk about. Sorry. Thanks for listening. Number 4, envy can influence behaviors and personalities. And we see that again in Laban's sons. In Titus 3:3 it says, "For we also once were foolish ourselves, disobedient, deceived, enslaved to various lusts and pleasures, spending our life in malice and envy, hateful, hating one another. Paul said we once were foolish ourselves. When we had the truth distorted and we were distracted by other things, we were foolish like this through all these things. But now we're changed. So you see how all these things influence our behaviors. It influences the directions we go in, our decisions that we're making, all those things. Even in a wedding. Okay. So just how powerful is the spirit of envy? I don't know why this is, I've always, with pride, you know that pride is like the father of everything, right? Everything that we go through started there. But look what it grew into. Matthew 27:15-18. This will show you just, if you think you can overcome this on your own. It says, now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to releasing the multitude of one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ? For they knew that they had handed him over because of envy. Envy is what put Jesus on the cross. That's how powerful that spirit is. So we overcome it through Jesus, right? 3-5, it says, then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your father and your grandfather and to your relatives there, and I will be with you. So Jacob called Rachel and Leah out of the field where he was watching his flock, and he said to them, I have noticed that your father's attitude toward me has changed, but the God of my father has been with me. But the God of my father has been with me, just as he promised me he would be. Remember back in 28, it says, look, God says, look, I'm with you. I will watch over you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. This was a promise 20 years in the making. And Jacob is owning that promise here. But the God of my father has been with me. And in verse 6 it says, you know how hard I've worked for your father. But that verse, what I really like in the New American Standard, it says, you know I have served your father with all my strength. His integrity, his strength. He worked hard. He gave Laban everything that he had and then some, which is no different than what Jesus would ask of us to do. He didn't just go through the motions because he had to do it. He worked. He gave his all to Laban. And then it says, but he has cheated me, changing my wages 10 times. So that shows you that Jacob was aware of all the times that Laban had messed with their agreement. He has changed my wages 10 times, has not allowed him to do, but he has cheated me, changing my wages 10 times. And I've cut off part of that scripture. It says, God has not allowed him to do me any harm. But the God of my father has not allowed me to do me any harm. For he said, the speckled animals will be your wages. The whole flock began to produce speckled young, and when he changed his mind and said, the striped animals will be your wages, then the whole flock produced striped young. In this way, God has taken your father's animals and given them to me. Again, we see a spiritual growth in Jacob's life. He's given credit to God, and we can see that all the way up from the beginning where we started, that whole conversation came because God told him, it's time to go home. Don't worry, I'll be with you, and this is what you need to do. And I again, can't take away from the fact of just how much that God is getting glory for what Jacob is doing. God is knowing where it comes from. He goes on to explain, one time during the mating season, I had a dream, and I saw that the male goats mating with the females were streaked and speckled and spotted. Then in my dream, the angel of God said to me, Jacob, and I replied, yes, here I am. And the angel said, "Look up. You will see that only the streaked, speckled, and spotted males are mating with the females of your flock, for I have seen how Laban has treated you. I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel, the place where you anointed the pillar of stone and made your vow to me. Now get ready and leave this country and return to the land of your birth." God uses difficult circumstances, difficult people. He uses time, all those things, to change things for the better. When we get to verse 41, which we won't get to today, again, we're going to learn that he had been there 14 years, plus the 6 years that he's been adding to that to do to get the goats and to earn his wages. 20 years of lies and manipulation, and yet he stayed. And then I got to thinking, why would he do that? You know, I asked that question earlier, and it was because Jacob is not the Jacob who left home. Right now, and we'll see that. We'll see that as we move forward. But right now, you start to see Jacob is not the same person. He's given God all the credit for what's happened. You can see that his trust has increased in who God is. And then in Psalm 118, it says, "It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes." David said it's better to have hope and to put your trust in the Lord than into man, and I think that's where Jacob's heart is right now. Does that make sense? And in Hebrews 13, it says, "Make sure that your character is free from love of money, being content with what you have, for he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I forsake you." That is a promise, right? The writer of Hebrews says in verse 6, which I love, "So that we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper, I will not be afraid. What will man do to me?" Can we say with confidence? When you look that word up, it means courageousness and boldness. And we'll start to see that as we move forward. We'll start seeing the confidence that Jacob has in who God is start to spill out of him a little more. He'll be more confident, more bold, so that we can say that the Lord is my helper. Last verses for tonight. Rachel and Leah responded. Now he's talking to his wife, remember? Rachel and Leah responded. They said, "That is fine with us. We won't inherit any of our father's wealth anyway. He has reduced our rights to those of foreign women, and after he sold us, he wasted the money you paid him for us. All the wealth God has given you from our father legally belongs to us and our children, so go ahead and do whatever God has told you." This is the first time that we've seen unity in this family. The very first time where Leah and Rachel and Jacob are on the same page. And it sounds like that they are selfish because it's all about money and wealth, but no, they make it clear that, you know, we weren't just given away as brides, we were sold. And what we're supposed to get, this dowry money that we were supposed to inherit, he has spent and wasted it. And now he treats us like foreign women. But they say, go ahead and do whatever God has told you to do. So we see unity in the family. And again, I think I'm trying to think, I don't know of other than maybe one more instance where there's a little bit of a glitch there, but they're on the same page on their journey home. Did I miss anything, Sam? Tell me.
Well, you know, I was thinking about last week was talking about you think he was kind of aware or blinded of what Laban was doing in the backside. And I think these chapters kind of make it seem that at very least he more understood what was going on in the background, yet still chose, like you said, to be there. Why he did it was just interesting to me. How many times have you been in a place where
No. Yes.
So, what if, during all that time when Rachel and Leah were lobbing children at each other, saying, look what I did, and all that we saw, I just had this picture of Laban in the background going, did you see what she did? Did you see what she did?
Pitting them
Almost like,
against each other.
yeah, and now they're going, wait a minute. Right at the end here, they're going, you know what? Let's do this. He's a jerk anyway. You know? I did. I saw. Yeah, he's an instigator. I can imagine him being that little voice in their head, trying to get them to pit them against each other. I mean, I know it doesn't say that, but I was just sitting here.
Oh no, I mean it makes perfect sense, and that's the kind of places my mind goes. Because even when we read ahead, Laban says, "You have taken my sons and daughters." You know, he is unchanged, but we see this change in Jacob's life, and even in Leah and Rachel's life here.